riding down a YouTube channel. It's the riding down a YouTube channel. It's the riding down a YouTube channel. It's the riding down a
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Riding Dad channel, or welcome if it's your first time. Either way, very glad to have you. Feels really weird doing this intro because I haven't filmed a video in like 3 weeks with my schedule. I just filmed a bunch beforehand, then had a really hectic couple weeks, and now we're finally back on a normal filming schedule, which really doesn't matter for you guys because I'm still uploading, but it feels weird for me. It's just weird. I got to get back into it. So, today we're switching brakes out. We're switching full brakes, which for me on this 2020 Lowrider S means 2 brake calipers in the front and 1 in the rear. I went with Lindahl. I know there's a bunch of different brake companies out there, Galfer, EBC, obviously Lindahl. There's probably 1 or 2 really common ones that I'm forgetting right now in the heat of the moment. But I just went with Lindahl, not for any necessary particular reason, just because honestly that's what Tucker Speed had in stock. Lindahl, I was honestly between Lindahl and Galfer because eventually I want to replace my rotors, and I like the rotors from Lindahl and Galfer kind of best. I like the cubics from Galfer, but I also really like the style of Lindahl. Anyway, went ahead and went with Lindahl. I am not replacing my rotors right now. Probably in the next year or 2, I'll wind up replacing my rotors. The Lowrider S comes with decent rotors from the factory. They are floating and obviously vented, which I think all Harleys, mostly all motorcycles, are probably vented anyway, but they're floating rotors. They're not terrible. So I'm going to keep those and just upgrade the brake pads and see how she goes. When I do replace the rotors, it is a good idea to replace the pads and start with fresh rotors and pads at the same time. That way they get bedded in correctly. So we're going to go ahead and install these suckers. I will say off camera I did the rear. It's the exact same process for the most part, just a little bit easier than the front because I was putting on my rear wheel fresh from powder coat and having a new tire. And for those of you that have changed or at least understand the process of removing your rear brake, especially if you have a chain and having to adjust your wheel on the rear for, you know, perfect centering for that chain sprocket, rear wheel brake removal is a gigantic pain. So there is no way I was doing that twice, basically undoing it and doing it again. It's just, it sucks. So that is definitely, I want to replace the stock rotor mount or the brake caliper mount. So I did go ahead and purchase the highest caliber of Lindahl. These are the extremes. There are 3. I think it's gold, maybe gold plus. I can't remember the other ones. I think the gold or gold plus or whatever is the middle ground. They specifically state that, you know, even the lowest grade of Lindahl is supposedly better stopping than your stock Harley. Also important to note, for this specific install, we are not going to be opening or removing or bleeding or anything with the system for it, like the actual oil system for it. My pads are not really worn down that much. This is not a replacement because I need it. This is a replacement because I want an upgrade. I don't have a ton of miles on this bike. The pads are a little bit worn, but not to the point where I feel like it's going to make that big of a difference. They are very similar. Like I said, I have a lot of life left on these pads. This is just an upgrade. So if you are replacing your brakes and your brake pads are, you know, they need to be replaced and they're really diminished from what they were originally, or your new pads for whatever reason are just a lot thicker, make sure it's a good idea and just try and open up your reservoir wherever you're at, front or rear. And then when you are, and we'll get to it. I'll show you. But when you're pushing those brake pads back and installing the new ones, just make sure that you have ample space in there and pay attention to it because you do have the potential of I guess flooding is the best term, just stressing the system, too much liquid in there and won't work correctly. So let's move you guys closer. Super simple install. Let's get to it. All right, so first, obviously, we got to get the actual caliper off of the rotor setup. Also important to note, and I forgot to tell you guys, make sure if you're using, this is sort of a common sense thing, but if you're using your same rotors when you're replacing pads, clean them very thoroughly with some brake cleaner, get everything off of there. Also, when you're doing this, make sure your hands are clean. It's honestly a good idea because this is going to be dirty. Once you remove this and we get the old pads out, if you wash your hands or put gloves on or something, or put gloves on now and then take them off later, something to make sure that you don't get any dirt on your new pads, because the more crap you have on this, the more potential for possible glazing and just overall bad brake performance you're going to have. So just make sure everything stays as clean on the interior as possible. Also a good idea when we get in there, depending on how dirty your brake system is, to go ahead and clean up any of those pistons in there, and go ahead and apply some more grease to them as well. And then obviously grease to the back of the new pads also, but we'll get to all that when we get there. First step, we're gonna have to obviously undo it. This is loose because, like I said, I just put tires on and wheels on, and there was no reason for me to tighten this up when I was going to take it off. So why work harder when you can work smarter? All right, once your brake caliper is off, see, obviously it's all dirty in there, and you can see obviously these pads are not terrible. If you're going to reuse these for whatever reason, this is not a good method. I don't know why you would reuse these, especially if you're taking them off, but they do sell tools that specifically push these out. But if you're not reusing these, you can just go ahead and use a flathead screwdriver and push them. You know, turn it a little bit by little bit, and it works just fine. Make sure they're as even as possible. Okay. Gonna go ahead and remove these two bolts right here. Obviously, we have everything out. Like I said, now is a really good time to go ahead and clean everything up, just to have it all clean. And then you're gonna reuse this. And if you get confused, it has an arrow. There, now it's in focus or in frame. And that arrow is to the top of it. So if you do get confused, just make sure arrow points to the banjo bolt pretty much. All right, once you got everything set up and clean for the new ones, drop this sucker in there. Drop the new brake pads in. Make sure that they fit correctly. And you're not forcing them or scratching them up against any surface that they're not supposed to be up against. All right, once you are to this point, it's not hard, but it is sort of annoying to make sure that they stay separated in the spots that they're supposed to be in. In fact, mine has already migrated away. All right, we're gonna start to put these bolts back in. Just to go under this little lever. Make sure you see that. The bolt goes in those and under that little tab, it keeps a little tension on there. Push that all the way through. And then same concept on the other side. Oh, went too far. There we go. And we'll go ahead and thread these bolts through. Go ahead and tighten them up. All right, once the new pads are in, just put it back in. Make sure at this process you don't press on the brake at all, and make sure they are all the way back. That way when you put them on, you don't have any issues. Put them on nice and easy. And reinstall using some thread locker your bolts. This one doesn't have thread locker. I'm just using it as a placeholder. We're going to put thread locker on it, and then obviously do the exact same on the next wheel. All right, easy as that, all done, both sides. I mean, start to finish, even videoing, it took me about 30 minutes tops. So now is the most important part of it, and that is to make sure that you don't ruin your new brake pads. You have to bed them in properly. And before I forget, this is what I was using in case somebody thinks that just, you know, putting red and tacky or whatever on those pistons or the back of the pads. It's specifically for brake parts. It's a brake parts lubricant. If you're just doing a one-time job and go to the auto parts store, by the counters, they always have like those little tiny packages of like 1 or 2 use things or whatever. One of those packages, I think it's like 30 or 40 cents, or with inflation now it's probably like $10. One of those tiny one-use packages will more than be enough for all of your brakes for the entire motorcycle, front and rear, including if you have, like myself, 2 discs in the front. So yeah, just use that. So now we have to bed them in properly. I could not find anything directly from Lindahl. I did reach out to Tucker Speed to make sure that the process that I'm about to tell you guys and the process that I'm going to use in a few minutes is the correct process for them, and there's no specific different process that Lindahl recommends for whatever reason. And this is a process I actually found on the Galfer site only because I knew somebody else talked about it and they had it written out. So basically you're going to start at about like 10 miles an hour, 10 to 15 tops, and do slow progressive stops. Do those a few times, then work up to in 10 mile an hour increments. So, you know, 10 to 15 a few times, 15 to 20, 25-ish a few times, 25 to 35-ish a few times, you know, all the way up to about 50 miles an hour, and then start that process again. Do that whole process 2 to 3 times. I'll probably err on the side of caution and do 3 times, and then you're pretty much ready. Still, I would say take a little caution or precaution on it because, one, there are new brakes, especially if you're replacing, like myself, with stock to the highest grade brakes that somebody offers, the pads. So they're going to feel a lot better. I'm sure they're going to have a lot more biting power and a lot more friction to them. So just be cautious of it. It's not going to feel like it normally does. Also, when you do replace them, whether or not, like I didn't have to, but whether or not you actually have to do the full bleeding of the system. And again, this is a really good time to do a bleeding of the system when you have the brake pads. I just bled my full brake systems last year, not even a full year ago, 7 or 8 months ago, somewhere around there. So I'll try to post that video now, or at least somewhere in the description or title, whatever. It's definitely in my lowrider playlist, I believe. So check that video out if you're curious how I did it. It's super easy, but since I just did it, it's new fluid. It was pretty well flushed out, so I'm not gonna do it now, but whether or not you do it or not, slowly depress that either front or rear brake activator to kind of get more pressure back in the system. Do it a few times until it builds up. It's gonna take a while. You know, you're starting from scratch basically, so it's gonna take a while to push it all back in the system. But do that, and then obviously at that point, if you're going to bleed them, bleed the brakes then. So we're all done. I'm excited to try this out. I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this. They're I think about 80 or 90 bucks, but Tucker Speed, like I said in the beginning of the video, that's where I got them. You can get them there too. Obviously, the link to these specific brake pads will be on there, but they carry a couple different Lindahl pads. Again, these are the Extreme. These are the highest caliber one that Lindahl carries. These, again, linked in the description. Make sure you use coupon code RIDINDAD because it'll get you 10% off. I think that's it, guys. I'm excited to try them out. I will definitely keep you guys posted in a future video of how I like them, if I noticed any difference. Like I said, I did put them on the rear as well. The rear is the exact same concept, minus having to fiddle with getting that rear caliper out, depending on what bike you have, but it's the exact same thing. At least on my bike, the rear is only a 2-piston. The front on these is a 4-piston, so the rear is just kind of 2 pistons you have to push back, and then the back is just kind of just a plate there. So thank you guys for watching very much. Check out everything in the description. Check out the videos at the end of this video. Hit the thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed. Turn on post notifications. All of that jazz. Check out my Instagram, my TikTok. And until the next time, guys, ride safe. Have fun. Dad out.